Welcome back to the channel, you curd nerds. We've got an IFR Mock Check Ride for you today. Now, if you are looking for more IFR training from this channel, make sure, of course, you sit and watch this video. But when you're done with this one, go click the little thing that's going to pop up somewhere around up here that is a whole playlist of IFR training videos that is intended to make you a safe IFR pilot. I don't really care if it's going to make you pass your check ride. I do care that it's going to make you a safe IFR pilot, because guess what? If you're a safe IFR pilot, you're probably going to pass your check ride. So instead of studying for the test, study to be safe, and then just happen to pass the check ride because you're a safe pilot already. Now, this student did something great while they were waiting on their DPE for their private pilot check ride. They went and got more training. The amount of times that I have seen students go, I've been waiting for my DPE for 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, and I haven't flown. And then they go and fail their check ride. It really sucks. I know there's a DPE shortage. Now that I have a medical, I applied to go be a DPE, so hopefully I get it. But instead of sitting around waiting for a DPE and doing absolutely nothing, he went and got more training. He went and got a high performance endorsement, complex endorsement. Now I understand aviation's not cheap. I understand not everybody can afford to do this, but if you can afford to do it, definitely go do it. Now, this student did pretty well for their IFR mock check ride. There was a few things that I think they should have had a little bit more exposure to before they got to me, and definitely before they got to their check ride, and that is SIDS and STARS, or Standard Instrument Departures and Standard Terminal Arrivals. Now, I get it. You're in a Cessna 172 or a Cherokee 140 or whatnot, and there's not a lot of SIDS and STARS that your aircraft is capable of or even allowed to do. Most of these apply to turboprop, turbojets, turbofans, etc., and your aircraft just isn't really capable of the climb gradients, even if they aren't limited to only turboprops, turbojets, turbofans, etc. So what I recommend to a lot of students so that they can get the exposure to SIDS and STARS is go to Trade a Plane, go find an airplane that you like a Cessna 206 or a SR-22 or 24 or what, the fancy Cirrus thing, and build a fake IFR flight plan. Build a flight plan that would include SIDS and STARS. And if you have access to a simulator like Microsoft Flight Sim or something like that, go practice it. Go fake it. Go try to do these procedures in a simulated environment so that you're not trying to figure out how they work on your check ride or on a mock check ride with me. Now, the rest of this stuff, he did pretty well. Not a whole lot of gripes or complaints. So I hope you learn a few things from this mock check ride. And as an IFR student, go do what you can to get exposure to SIDS and STARS. Let's get into it.
All right, so now that I hit those record buttons, I do just want to double check, get this recorded. Are you okay with me recording this mock check ride, whether it be for content creation on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, etc.?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So it's Nick. And so tell us how your training's been going, how many hours are you at, how are you enjoying your instrument training, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I really enjoy my instrument training to the point that I think one can enjoy instrument training. It's pretty nitty gritty. It's pretty detail oriented. There's not quite literally not a lot of looking outside the airplane. So, I think I enjoy it as much as one can. I do enjoy it. I'm at 300 hours. Here in the Denver area this spring, we had some really, really awful thunderstorms. And so we just didn't really have much time to go out and do a ton of instrument flying. So I used that time kind of to bang around in the pattern, get my complex endorsement, my high performance endorsement, things of that nature. So
Well, that's definitely a good use of your time, complex, high performance endorsements. Those definitely open up the doors for a lot of other cool airplanes, Cessna 182s,
yeah,
185s, a Super Cub, a lot of seaplanes. They're over 200 horsepower, so
yeah.
that's awesome. Definitely using your time wisely as opposed to just sitting around going, "Oh, I wonder when the weather's gonna get
Yeah.
better."
No, I appreciate that because as I'm sure it can be rough sometimes.
Yep, yep. I know training up in, trying to teach up here in Wisconsin, it's just it's unless you're in a Cirrus with, certified for flight and known icing, it's kind of,
Yeah.
anytime the clouds are low in the winter, it's like, well, not really
Right.
much we can do.
Right. Exactly.
Um, but you've taken check rides, you've taken a check ride before, so you understand, there's three outcomes to every check ride: satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and incomplete. Satisfactory really just means that you are consistently within inside the standards. Doesn't necessarily mean that you don't momentarily fall outside the standards. A few standards that aren't really like wiggle room things is like busting through minimums, losing situational awareness and being unwilling or unable to recognize it, um, stuff like that. Uh, Unsatisfactory, danger to national airspace system. Examiner has to take control of the aircraft to prevent damage to the aircraft, exceeds the limitations. Um, and then incomplete, this would be like, hey, ran out of time, weather, aircraft airworthiness, illness, stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, so right off the bat, what's the point of an instrument rating? Like, why do we even bother getting an instrument rating?
Well, it allows us to do a couple things. Um, the first one and the most obvious one is it allows us to fly in the clouds solely by reference to the instruments and on an IFR flight plan.
Awesome, awesome. Now let's say you went and bought like you got the right scratcher out of the gas station and you won $500,000. So now you can buy like an SR22 turboed Cirrus that's capable of, I think its service ceiling is like 24,000 feet. Does an instrument rating open up any new airspace for you?
It does. It opens up alpha airspace above 18,000 feet.
Solid. Now with about 300 hours, you've kind of checked the boxes for a commercial rating. Have you gotten your commercial certificate yet?
I have not, but I have checked all the aeronautical experience boxes. So
Okay.
I've done
So you're
my cross countries and nighttime and night landings and things of that nature.
awesome, awesome. Now, is your instrument rating going to impact your privileges and limitations once you get your commercial certificate?
Yes, it will. It'll allow me to uh, carry passengers and cargo for hire at night and in excess of 25 nautical miles from my airport.
You know, my understanding of that 61 133, it's got nothing to do with cargo. The FAA
Okay.
doesn't care about boxes.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the FAA does care about boxes, but a lot of regulations are geared towards the carriage of passengers because, we care more about people than we care about somebody's Amazon package, right?
Right. For sure.
So awesome. Now, to maintain, your privileges of operating under IFR conditions or on an IFR flight plan, stuff like that, you got to get a couple things done within a certain time period. So, what are those things that you need to make sure you get done?
Uh, I believe you're talking about currency. So
Mhm.
you have to shoot 6 approaches within the preceding 6 calendar months. You have to do comply with or perform holding procedures and tracking and intercepting radials.
Solid. Um, Now, let's say for some reason or another, you end up not accomplishing this within that 6 month period. Is there anything else you could do to get your currency back?
At that point, you'd go up with a safety pilot because you're no longer current. If you're in VFR condition, the safety pilot just has to be rated in the airplane, and
Well,
you can shoot your approaches and holding and tracking radials then.
awesome. Now, there's a little bit of point of contention on this one. Let's say, since you do have your complex and your high performance endorsement, let's say you go and rent like a 182 with retractable gear.
Yeah,
Does your safety pilot need those endorsements as well?
I agree. There is some contention in it, and the most recent, I used to be of the belief that yes, that the safety pilot did then have to have those endorsements as well. I have since through discussion with different instructors, I agree, some contention. I guess I'm now of the belief that no, rating has to do with class and category. So if it's a single engine land airplane, endorsement has nothing to do with that.
All right. Now, my kind of follow up question to this, because this is my kind of belief on it. Um, who is acting as pilot in command while the IFR pilot is under the hood? Is it the safety pilot or the IFR pilot?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, it would
Now
make
the
sense that it would be the safety pilot because they're the one,
exactly,
it's a visual, you're on a visual clearance. They're the one visually looking.
and that's my like little point of
Yeah.
contention, because for you to act as PIC of an aircraft, you need to be properly rated for category and class and endorsed if endorsements are
Yeah.
required.
Yeah.
Um, sure, when you look at the safety pilot regulation, the regulation that covers safety pilots specifically,
Yeah.
it is correct that they do need at a minimum of a private pilot certificate. But if the safety pilot is going to be the one acting as pilot in command, I'm under the belief that they do need those endorsements, and it makes you safer, right? Because the
Yeah.
question comes up, it's like, okay, well, technically, a private pilot could be a safety pilot in a Piper Malibu.
Yeah.
Your insurance would beg to differ.
Right. No, 100%. Yeah. 100%.
um, so the safer way is saying like, hey, yeah, they do need the endorsements. But just make sure that if you end up with a DPE that like argues saying, well, technically the regulation, come up with the fact that like, well, if the safety pilot is acting as pilot in command, given that the pilot in command is the final authority to the safe operation of an aircraft, I'm under the hood. I can't reasonably be the final authority if I can't see out the window.
Yeah.
So they would be acting as pilot in command. They have to be able to operate the aircraft.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like there's maybe a little bit more nuance there when it comes to, um, you know, legal versus proficient or safe versus
Mhm.
proficient.
Yep. And I mean, either way, saying that they need more gonna isn't necessarily wrong. Just make sure that you can articulate your point of view, because I can't find any clarification on it.
Yeah, yeah. If only there was a governing body that could potentially offer clarification on so many things like that.
I know, I know. Have you ever tried to get them on the phone?
No.
It's yeah, it's like pulling teeth out of an alligator. Now let's say you don't end up going up in the or let me pedal back just a little bit. Do you have to do these instrument approaches, tracking and whatnot? Does it have to be in an airplane?
No, it just has to be in an approved flight simulator or flight training device, and you can do any combination of any of it in either an airplane or a flight training device.
All right, now let's say you got a buddy that's like, "Hey man, I got access to a 737 full motion sim. You want to go get instrument current in it? Does this count?"
I would imagine not because it's in a different category and class.
Yep, something that you're not qualified for.
Right.
Right. Um, awesome. Now let's say for some reason, you go for like 14 months without flying at all, so no approaches, nothing at all. What do you need to do now to get your instrument privileges back?
You have to do what's called an instrument proficiency check.
hmm who can you do an instrument proficiency check with? I'm just gonna go talk to my grandma. She's gonna give me an IPC.
Now she's got to be a qualified instructor, so double I. She can be a DPE. Um, I'd say maybe your grandma's the only DPE I'd be willing to do an instrument proficiency check with, or she could be a member of the some sort of member of the armed forces. There's a category there.
Yep. Yeah. Now when it comes, let's say, the reason you haven't gone and done any instrument flying is because you've been getting your multi-engine rating done. And multi-engine airplanes, they're expensive. So you've had to stop training and start back up, save a little couple dollars. And now you finally get done with your multi-engine, but you did your multi-engine with instrument privileges. So you did some approaches on your multi-engine check ride. Does that count as an IPC?
No, it has to be in the category and class.
So your instrument privileges don't apply to your category and class. Your instrument privileges are instrument privileges. You just have to be qualified to operate category and class. So
Okay.
when you take your check ride, that checks the box of an IPC,
Okay.
right? Um,
So
now,
what you're saying is my instrument rating applies to the multi-engine. I don't need to get a multi-engine instrument rating, but isn't there a provision that says that that isn't there a provision or a regulation that prohibits the sort of transfer from one category to the next?
When it comes to landings
Okay.
and carriage of passengers, that's what you're
Okay. Okay.
right. Because the 3 takeoffs and landings in category and class.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's be honest, like an ILS and a Seminole and an ILS and a 172, like, are they that different?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Same theory.
Yep. You just it's just when you do take your multi-engine check ride, there are a few boxes you have to check extra on the check ride for your multi-engine privileges to apply. And you'll worry about that when you go get your multi-engine rating. You have to like shoot one approach single engine and another approach, fine. And then if there's autopilot, you got to do one coupled to the autopilot.
Okay.
So you can read the ACS if you're really curious. But when it comes to logging approaches, we need to make sure that we're logging these things legally. Let's say that you are in actual IFR conditions, cruising along, fat, dumb, and happy. You get to the final approach fix, you start your descent, 200 feet later, you break out. Can we log this approach?
Has to be done in minimums.
So if it starts in actual final approach fix inward, we can count it. Under the hood, you got to take it to minimums.
You got to be the minimums. Oh, shoot. Okay.
Yep. Because I mean, let's think of that. Airline pilots, like, it's rarely ever actual minimums, right?
Right.
Airline pilots be going to the sim every 6 months because like they'd be getting 3 approaches down to minimums.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
So actual conditions, I could take it to final approach fix. If it's IFR at the final approach fix, I can count it.
Even
Simulated,
if it's VMC 10 feet below the final approach fix. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Because you initiated the descent, I guess, stabilized the aircraft on the way down. But if you're under the hood or simulated conditions, even in a simulator, you got to take it to the minimums. And these are just those little things that catch people.
Okay.
It would just get real awkward because you're like, shit, I need an IPC because none of these approaches were to minimums.
Right.
Right. So when we're filing a flight plan, right, there's a couple different rules when it comes to instrument. So if I file like a VFR flight plan to a destination, whatever, I'm filing VFR, the weather should be VMC, nothing really needs to apply. But if I start filing IFR, what needs to be at my destination for me to not need an alternate?
If you're filing IFR, for you to not need an alternate, you need to have certain weather forecast from 1 hour before the time of arrival to 1 hour after, and that's 3 miles of visibility and 2,000 foot ceilings.
Okay. The one thing that a lot of people forget because it doesn't really fit in the 1, 2, 3 rule mnemonic is there needs to be a published approach that's available to your aircraft.
Right, and if there's no published approach, then you have to file an alternate.
Whether it's VMC at your destination or not.
Yeah.
Right?
I've heard that 32100 published approaches.
Okay. Yeah, I've always remembered the 1, 2, 3 rule, and it's like approach 1, 2, 3 is the way I remember it.
Right.
I need an approach that's available to my aircraft. So like if your aircraft only has VORs and the destination only has an ILS, can't do it, right? Now your aircraft is like a 2002
Aero.
All right. Yeah. Now when it comes to equipment, what does that thing got?
Avionics wise?
Yeah.
Okay. So it has 2 GPSs. It has a 650, and then which is connected to a G5. And then it has a 430, which isn't connected to anything. So I typically use the 430 basically in replace of a DME. So just tune up the nearest page, fly your arcs that way.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. And just to make sure, your departure airport BJC destination FMM.
Yeah.
Is based on the plan. Okay. Awesome. I'm seeing that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay,
So your aircraft, as you said, it's got that 650. That 650, it's capable of loss, right?
that's correct.
Now, how does this impact your availability, your choices when you're picking an alternate?
You don't have to. You can pick an airport that only has GPS based approaches.
Now, are you saying that my alternate and my destination can both only be based on GPS?
That's correct.
That is correct. Awesome. So I'm gonna just pull up a random approach real quick,
Okay.
and we're gonna look at it. We're not really too worried about a whole lot of the stuff on it. I'm just gonna share my screen, see what I'm looking at.
Okay.
If I'm not big enough, just click on me, and it should make me bigger. Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. So really, what I'm asking about is this little A right here.
Yeah.
What does this little A mean?
Yeah, that's going to mean that the alternate minimums at that airport are non-standard.
Okay. So what are standard alternate minimum?
Standard alternate minimums, if there's a precision approach um, available, is going to be 600-foot ceilings. And then for non-standard, for a non precision approach would be you need 800-foot ceilings.
Okay. What visibility for each of them?
That's disappeared from my mind. Let me see what I can find there.
It's 2 miles.
It's 2 miles. Okay.
Yeah, just for the sake of time, it's 2 mile
Okay.
visibility. Um, Now, can you find this approach? KFMM
Yeah.
RNAV GPS runway 14.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll go look it up here.
Now, if I was to use this one as an alternate, what would be the alternate minimums?
Let me get that for you.
All right.
Fort Morgan. You said the RNAV 14?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
the KFMM RNAV runway 14.
See what we can't find for alternate minimums. The alternate minimums for Fort Morgan are category D. You need 2.5 miles, 800-foot ceilings, and 2.5 miles of visibility.
So nothing that really applies to us.
No, I'm not flying category D airplanes yet. And then the two stands for NA when local weather not available. Because I see 1 and 12.
Okay. So for this approach, we've got
Mm-hmm.
notes 1 and 2, right? 1 saying the category D takes it to 802.5.
Uh-huh.
And then the second note says that it's not authorized when we can't get local weather. So we would need to look for NOTAMs to make sure that the local weather isn't NOTAMed out,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So your aircraft, since it is equipped with WAS, what minimums would we go down to on this approach?
We would go down to, with WAS, we would go down to 4,845 feet.
Solid. Now let's just take a look. I mean, we didn't really talk about a route or anything just yet, so we're gonna kind of ballpark one. I say if we're departing BJC, this looks like a pretty solid fix to go to initially. Oh no, not that one. Go floor or ELOR. That's what that is. Not so ELOR, and then maybe the VOR is probably a solid point. Then we could probably take. What sucks? Well, we're in an RNAV capable aircraft, so we could just head straight to that intersection, and then straight to Siler. That be an appropriate? That look like an appropriate route to you?
The only problem with that is you probably wouldn't get that cleared because it's directly through the Bravo of Denver.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, that's very possible that they're going to tell me to pound sand on that one. Well, have
But
you been
other
told no?
before,
Yeah.
yeah, I filed IFR a few times around there, and you typically don't get anywhere near the Bravo. But for the purposes of this discussion, that seems totally fine.
I mean, if I'm going to be honest, that's what I would file.
Right.
If I- like, um, okay. Well, let's take a look at Rocky Mountain because this is where you're departing from,
That's
correct?
correct.
Awesome. Now, you've got a couple different departure procedures in here.
Hmm.
Take a look at this one. It says continued on the following page. There's not really anything important on that. Not really showing me a whole lot on that one. Not really anything too complicated on this one. Not really any big climb gradients that we've got to maintain. So I'm going to go to an airport that I'm familiar with. I'm
Sure.
going to go check out Salt Lake City Airport. So KSLC. And we're going to look at the Salt Lake 4 departure.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, so let's just pretend that we are going to be taking off runway 17 and we get cleared for the Salt Lake 4, or at least they told us, expect the Salt Lake 4 departure.
Hmm.
Is your aircraft capable of this departure?
Well, let's see what we've got. You said runway 14.
Negative, runway 17.
Oh, runway 17. Okay. Assigned heading of 163 standard with minimum climb grading of 260 feet per nautical mile to 6,000 feet. Then assigned heading. So we've got to figure out if the biggest thing here is we got to figure out if we can do 260 feet per nautical mile to only to 6,000. My gut feeling is yes, if only there was something that could tell us whether or not we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
260 at 90 knots. That's like a 390 foot per minute climb. In the Arrow, I think we can do that.
Awesome. Is there anything else with this?
Yeah, we can see if it's not authorized or if it's only authorized to like jet traffic. Sometimes that's the case. Radar required. So radar vector departure to assigned route or fixed. Crossing altitude.
Now, this is the thing that a lot of students miss on this one. They miss the second climb gradient.
Oh.
So you have assigned heading 283, 380, 343,
Yeah.
standard with a minimum climb gradient of 400 per nautical mile up to 8,300. So you've got a
Right.
minimum climb gradient up to 6,000, and then you've got another one up to 8,300.
Yeah.
So is that 400 one? Are you capable of that?
Let's see, what was it? 400. No, absolutely not.
No. So that one's pretty steep.
Yeah.
Right. So just make sure read through the whole procedure.
Okay.
Remember, it's your check ride, not the DPE's check ride, not my anything. So take your time, read through it. If the check ride's moving too quick, you're moving too quick. Take a breath. Make sure you've read everything associated with it because you stopped at a comma, not a period.
Right.
Okay. And that's why I picked this one because it's got that second climb gradient, and that second climb gradient's not very common.
For sure.
Now let's go back to your area. Now with your aircraft, since it's got that GPS, it means it's capable of RNAV. Can you just give me like a Barney style breakdown of what RNAV actually means versus GPS?
Well, RNAV stands for area navigation, so it's any type of navigation that I guess it's any type of navigation other than pilotage and dead reckoning. So NDB would be an RNAV, VOR would be an RNAV, things of that nature are still RNAV.
So my aircraft, personally, my aircraft, because I'm just going to use that as an example because it's something I know. all it's got is two Narco 12D radios that have VORs and ILSs in them. Is that aircraft capable of RNAV?
Uh, y- no, not RNAV approaches.
Okay, so is it capable of RNAV navigation?
Yeah, if it's got VORs, it's still that's a type of area navigation.
Okay, so I'm gonna open up just a little Microsoft Paint just to give like a little um so what RNAV is right off the bat. So RNAV is a kind of umbrella that sits over top of a bunch of different forms of navigation. All right, is really the best way to describe it. So I've got RNAV out there, and then inside of RNAV, I have things like GPS. So your aircraft, congratulations, you have an RNAV system. But when we start talking about VORs, we're talking about the aircraft listening to multiple VORs. So it's VOR, VOR, or DME, DME. And the big difference between RNAV and me just tracking radials with my airplane and the Narco 12Ds is the airplane's doing this for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So RNAV is area navigation, meaning you've got a system that is picking up all signals available to that RNAV system in the area and
Okay.
then triangulating its position based on that.
Okay.
So your aircraft, it's GPS RNAV, meaning it's picking up all the satellites in the area to figure out its location. When we look at some older RNAV systems like VOR, it's picking up literally every VOR it can see and figuring out its position from there. Me just twisting needles and tuning in frequencies and tune, test, and identify and all that jazz, not RNAV. That is Victor Airway Navigation.
Okay. Okay. So
Okay.
you have to have a different system that tunes into multiple VORs and triangulating your location based off of that.
Yeah. So when
Okay.
you are looking at your 650, you can go over to like a satellite page where it's showing you like the signal of every satellite that the airplane's picking up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think of like a VOR RNAV system. Think of like each one of those little blocks that it's showing you as a VOR that it's picking up.
Okay.
Okay. Um, so I know you've never experienced one of those, but like a CRJ 200, an Embraer 145, even the Airbus, all have RNAV systems that pick up GPS and have GPS as like a separate little idea over here, and they overlay it on top of the ground-based navigation RNAV.
Okay.
All right. But if we're in like a traditional, style of aircraft where we're flying from VOR to VOR via radials and we're tuning in those radials, that's just traditional IFR navigation.
Okay.
All right. Um, so since you have RNAV, you are fully capable of doing this route, just going from fix to fix to fix to fix without actually following a Victor Airway.
Yeah, that's correct. I can identify those fixes.
Um, now, what is this big brown number down here?
Oh, that's the Aroka.
Okay, what is the Aroka?
The Aroka's the obstacle obstacle something clearance altitude. I've got it written down. Let's see what the Aroka is.
The off-route obstruction clearance altitude.
Off-route obstruction clearance
Yep.
altitude. Okay.
So
I've got it here.
So this little section right here, where we are going from this VOR to the Whitney fix, we are completely off route, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Would it be safe for me for this leg, given that, let's say we filed for 9,000 feet?
Yes, it would be safe in that the minimum vectoring altitude there for ATC is 8,000 feet.
Okay. Is that minimum vectoring altitude published?
It is not.
Okay. Just remember, we can't file based on stuff that's not published, right? I don't know what that is.
Right.
Right. So if you're below your minimum off-route obstruction clearance altitude, because that minimum off-route obstruction clearance altitude is based on this blue block right here, right?
Yeah.
Based on this grid coordinate, we are well within that grid at 12,100. So if I filed at 9,000, I mean, based on looking at these altitudes on the chart, it's probably some kind of obstacle down here. I could even look at like a VFR chart and be like, oh yeah, it's all over here and down here. It shouldn't be too big of a concern for me. But just to be safe, the safer route would probably look something more like that. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted Hoyt. There we go. The safer route would probably look something like that because I've got an actual published minimum. I've got an actual published altitude that
Right.
should maintain some level of obstruction clearance.
Mhm.
What altitude is this? Which one is this called?
That's called your MEA.
Okay. And if I was below this MEA, am I guaranteed any kind of nav aid coverage?
There's not a published MOCA on that route, it doesn't look like, so probably not.
Probably not. You are correct. Why is this VOR filled in and black?
That's what's called a compulsory reporting point. You have to report that when you're not in a radar environment.
Solid. Where'd it go? There it is. So we've got Colorado Air and Spaceport right here. This little one right here. What's this MON?
It's a minimum operational network. It basically means that if there's a like a widespread GPS or satellite outage, there that you can get onto the ground via non-GPS approaches within 100 nautical miles.
Solid. Love it. And that's the airport that it would take you to. Now, let's go and find an approach. Now, let's say we are getting cleared for this approach. Looks like we're probably going to come from Silver. All right. So Silver looks like it's going to be, around this little area over here. Well, let's just make sure I don't see any of these fixes anywhere else on here. But Harpoo. Give us a little bit more context. Okay, so Harpoo's way over there. So Silver's over here. So it looks like we're probably right around KSEC. Would you agree?
Where's based off of where your mouse is or where?
Let's put KSEC in here so I can identify it on the map.
Are you still on the 1.4 or the 3.2?
Sorry, the 3.2.
Ah, there we go. That would help me.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We're gonna go over to the 3.2. Hey, now we're talking about KSIC and Harpoo.
Yep, there we go. So let's say we hit Silver and ATC told us, or negative. Let's say we hit Hoyt right here.
Mm-hmm.
That little fix right there. And ATC said, proceed direct. Which one do I want to use? I think we'll say proceed direct KSEC for the RNAV GPS runway 32 into Fort Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
Can you brief this approach for me?
Yeah. So if you're coming inbound on KSEC, so towards the west, there's no procedure turn required, and you have to be at 7,400 feet. Then you intercept Harpoo, which is an intermediate fix, and at Harpoo, you can either, if you're going to fly this with a glide slope, you can either just stay at 7.4 and intercept the glide slope a little bit earlier than JDEC. Or if you're going to be flying this with, like, say, LNAV down to LNAV minimums, at Harpu, you'd begin your descent down to intercept JDEC at 6,200 feet. And then from JDEC, you take it down to we're talking LNAV, so our LNAV minimums of 4820 and 1 statute mile of visibility. Then at that point, we're going to brief our missed approach procedure. We're going to climb to 7,400 feet direct to Cootie and hold, and then that's what we're going to do in terms of navigation. We also need to brief sort of the more the less flying side of the approach. So we need to make sure that our that we comply with any notes, i.e. the takeoff minimums and the alternate minimums. We need to read our notes saying the local altimeter setting is not received. You have to use the Afrin altimeter setting, increase your decision altitude to 4,879 feet and all visibilities by 1/8 of a mile. If we're going to be doing the LNAV, it would be our MDA by 100 feet. So we'd go down to 4920. And then if we're in category C helicopter, if we're in a category C helicopter, visibility reduction below, a visibility below 1 statute mile is not authorized. We'd
Okay.
make sure all our radios are tuned in, the date checks out, check out what kind of runway approach lighting system we have, things of that nature.
Okay. Now, when it comes to a briefing, just remember briefings are generally done like they're done in the flight deck to create kind of a shared mental model and even help you create like a plan in your head of how we're going to accomplish this. Okay. So we covered a lot, and we covered a lot that doesn't apply to us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when remember check rides, they're intended to be with the ACS, they're intended to be situational. They're intended to be, what's the word? Instead of, hey, let's check this box, it's, hey, we're actually in this situation. Let's pretend we're doing this. I can't remember the word for what check
It's
rides are
just
supposed to be now.
applicable to the situation
Yeah.
or specialized to the situation.
Exactly. So when we're saying, hey, brief this approach for me if we're going direct KSEC. Okay, hey, so it looks like we're getting cleared direct KSEC. Looks like from KSEC it's going to be 7,400 with no procedure turn at Harpo. We're going to drop on down to 6,200 so we can grab the glide path. We're going down to LPV minimums of 4796. I can't set single digits, so we're going to set 4,800. If I don't break out by 4,800 with a mile visibility, I'm going to do the missed approach, which is climb 7,400 direct to Cootie and hold. Looks like it's going to be a parallel entry into that hold. We've got the local altimeter setting, so none of those notes apply to us. Runway touchdown zone elevations 45, 46. And I got plenty of runway to land. Looks like it's probably going to be a left turn off or even a back taxi when I do land, given that there's no taxiways down there. Minimum safe altitude out of all these sectors is 7,700. So if I lose situational awareness, we're just going to hop on up to 7,700. Do you get any comments, questions, concerns, or additions?
No, that all makes sense.
Yeah, so you see how now we kind of have a plan. We have an idea of what we're doing, as opposed to ensuring that we talked about everything on the plate.
Yeah.
And if we brief like that, even when it's just us in the aircraft, what I've noticed from teaching students and from even me out flying around, if I just brief top to bottom, I have no idea what's going on, and every single fix is a surprise. But if I tell a story saying, hey, we're going to KSEC 7,400 at Harpo, I'm going to drop down to 6,200 to grab the glide path at JDEC, and then we're going down to our minimums, I've got this like step plan in my head of what I'm going to be doing next. What I've noticed a lot of students when it comes to that check ride, they're trying to talk about everything to make sure that the DP doesn't like give them a little like, gotcha, you missed that. Instead of talking about everything to make sure you check everything, read the whole plate before you start talking.
Okay.
There's nothing stopping you from just reading the entire plate before you start talking, to make sure that you know what you're going to say.
Right.
All right. And again, this isn't necessarily, like I'm not saying, hey, you suck because you don't know how to do an approach briefing. No, it comes with experience. It comes with practice.
For sure.
Right. Um, and again, what you did isn't necessarily wrong. We just talked about a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily apply to our aircraft. And if we were in the airplane bombing onto KSEC, by the time you got there, you'd be like, hey, ATC, I need a hold because I'm not done with my approach briefing.
Right.
Okay. Um, so just keep those kind of things in mind. Read the whole plate and then talk about the story. Talk about the plan that you're going to accomplish. All right. But you did cover all the important material, except for the MSA. MSAs are really important, especially in
Okay.
mountainous areas.
Yeah.
So I don't even bother saying like, hey, if we're such and such from such and such, we're going up to here and here. No. The only reason I'm going up to a minimum safe altitude is because I don't know where I'm at.
Right.
So I might as well go to the highest one.
Yeah.
Okay. I did screw it up though. The minimum safe altitude, the highest one is 9,000. So we're going to hop on up to 9,000 instead of 7,700.
Right. Outside of southeast of Harpu.
Mm-hmm. But again, if I'm going up to an MSA, it's because I don't know what the hell's going on.
Right.
So, solid briefing. Just try to give us a little bit more of a story.
Okay.
Where else? Are there any other big items I want to talk about on a plate? We talked about approaches. Talked about departure procedures. There's an arrival into Denver we can talk about. Most of these are probably going to be like jet only, so it's kind of hard to find one. Which one is this? And one. Where did it go? One. So, I was looking at departure procedure, but I couldn't find one. So I couldn't find it. There it is. So we're going to be looking at the DAND 1 arrival. If you want to pull that up on your end, I'm pulling it up on my end.
I've got it up.
Awesome. Now, is your aircraft capable of this arrival?
No, because it's a jet arrival.
There we go. Yep, turbojets expect that. Is there any notes like specifically stating that jets only?
Is there another page?
I mean, there's a page 2.
Arrival route description. I guess the only other way you could determine that we're not capable of it is just because, some of the altitudes on this arrival are well out of the capability of the Aero. Flight level
Yep.
210. We're not going anywhere near there.
No, we're not. So just for training purposes, let's pretend we are in an aircraft that is capable of these altitudes.
For sure.
Now, sorry about that. Let's say we are cooking along in a, SR-22 turbo. That's capable of these altitudes.
Yep, that's correct.
So we're cooking along at 23,000 feet, and we got told proceed direct Garden City to join the DDAND 1 arrival.
Okay.
Once we hit once we hit Garden City, can we descend? Is there any altitude that we can go down to, or are we still stuck at this altitude? What are we doing next?
So we're gonna join Garden City. We have to be at flight level 210 along that route until Cells intersection, and at Cells we can descend down to 18,000 feet.
Okay. So there's two different kind of clearances you can get when it comes to a star. And here's the thing: I know you've never done a star because your aircraft's not capable. Most stars, again, they start at like 18,000 feet, right?
Right.
Um, so there's two clearances you can really get when it comes to a star: join and descend via.
Okay.
Join means follow it laterally. Descend via means follow it laterally and vertically.
Okay.
So head to Garden City and join the DDAND 1 arrival. We're going to follow this route until I get a clearance to descend.
Okay.
Okay. If I get cleared descend via the DDAND 1, then I'm going to exactly as it sounds like, descend via. But just recognize that there's two different clearances you can get: join and descend via. You could also hear things like follow. But if you don't get a descend via clearance, you have not been cleared to descend.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just gonna make a note because that's
Yeah, of course.
obviously, stars and things like that are areas we talk less about just because we can't really do them.
Hmm.
Certainly here in Denver, they just start so
Exactly.
high, and I'd assume it applies to most other places in the country as well. Two different clearances with stars, descend via and join.
Yep. And I mean,
Okay.
given given that you are correct, there's not a whole lot of experience with stars. What I recommend to a lot of students, just so they can get that experience and get that application, is do things like go to Trade a Plane and
Okay.
find an airplane that you like and build a flight plan to bring it home.
Okay.
Right? Something that's capable, like sure, a 182, if it's pressurized and turbocharged and whatnot, it can probably
Yeah.
get up to those altitudes. But I mean, just play stupid. Like, hey, I won the lottery and I'm gonna go buy a CL65. It's just
Right.
that, oh well, there's not any for sale on Trade a Plane. Uh,
Oh, come on. That's a great plane.
yeah, yeah. Nobody's selling their CRJ 200s. Come on. Um,
Tough market.
yeah, tough market, tough market. Ah, I was gonna buy one so I could go on vacations with my family. Um, so I mean, just the things that you don't touch on regularly, try and brush up on them,
Hmm.
right? Because remember, your instrument rating doesn't limit you to a Piper Cherokee or an
Right.
Arrow. Sorry.
Oh,
You
hey, it's
know.
technically a Cherokee. It's a version of a
It-
Cherokee.
Yep. Yep.
I get told
Um.
that by the tower every day.
Oh, because they're like, hey, Cherokee, blah blah blah,
No,
and you're like,
well,
well, it
it's
took.
it's typically, they're talking to a different plane and they say give way to the Cherokee off your left, and I'm like, I'm an Arrow. Gosh darn it.
Oh God, it's funny. I know. When it comes to me and ATC, and they're trying to like direct somebody around me. They rarely ever use like the description of my aircraft. They're just like the weird one with the engine on top.
Right.
Um, because if they're like the lake and they're like, yeah, the water, like no, 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 no,
Oh, that's funny.
the aircraft lake. Um, yeah, it's fun. So yeah, just brush up on the stuff that you don't touch on very often, and I think you'll be good when it comes to charts and procedures and stuff like that. Now, let's get into some instrumentation. We're going to talk about ground-based navigation aids, then we'll talk about some GPS stuff. So just give me like a Barney style breakdown of how an ILS works. What are the big components of an ILS?
So you'll have uh the box, the actual ILS itself, which sits at the opposite end of the runway. It works by broadcasting different signals, and then when you're intercepting, the ILS in your airplane intercepts both signals, or both, I guess frequencies is the better term. When you receive both frequencies, then that's what's going to center your localizer. The same works in general for the glide slope. So it's going to have a localizer, and then it'll have a glide slope. And then there's also the ILS in your airplane that receives those frequencies and gives you lateral and vertical guidance.
All right, all right. So we got a couple different errors that could appear when it comes to a glide, or I guess we really only have one when it comes to a glide slope. Um, can you talk to me about what a false glide slope is?
Yeah, a false glide slope would be an indication where you're flying around and the glide slope is telling you that you are not where you are um, in relation to the ground. So you can make sure you sort of like dummy proof your approach by making sure that you intercept the final approach fix and that glide slope is centered when you are at the altitude at the final approach fix that you should be.
Okay. So how could I identify a false glide slope? Let's say again, I'm cruising around, fat, dumb, and happy. ATC says cleared direct final approach fix, cleared for the ILS, and they dropped me out of 9,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
How could I identify that if I've grabbed the false glide slope as opposed to the actual glide slope?
Well, if you're let's say you're on the glide slope and you're not sure whether it's correct or not. You've intercepted the glide slope, you're flying the glide slope down, and you go, okay, good, I'm coming up on the final approach fix. And then you look at the altitude on the final approach fix and it says that you should be at 5,200 feet. And you say, well, hang on a second, give me a second. It says it says I'm at, 6,800 feet. That's a pretty good indication that you're flying a false glide slope.
Yeah, that's not a bad. Wait, false glide slopes are also a lot steeper than
Okay.
the normal one, right? So normal one's usually around 3 degrees. Is normally around 3 degrees. False glide slopes can be around like 6 to 9 degrees. So in your airplane, you'd be looking at like a 1,500 feet per minute descent if you're following
Right.
a false glide slope, right? If you're in a faster airplane, you could be 2,000 feet per minute on a
Right.
false glide slope. So obviously, if you catch yourself power idle, pushing the nose at the dirt, approaching VNO,
Yeah.
we're on the false glide slope.
Right. Something
Right.
doesn't seem right.
Exactly. Um, but after a long day bumping around in the clouds, getting kind of tired, it's very likely you'd be like, I see the needle, send it. You're tired.
Yeah.
Um, now, so we've got a couple different ways that we can measure our distance from the glide slope or from the airport, right? When it comes to an ILS, because we've got three major pieces of an ILS. We have our guidance, which is the localizer and the glide slope that we just talked about. And we have some way of measuring distance from the
Mm-hmm.
airport. And then our final segment would be the visual segment. Can you give me a couple different tools that I could use to actually measure my distance from the airport as part of an ILS?
Yeah, so you can put the ILS into your DME and you can read the DME directly off the ILS. You just have to know that the ILS is on the opposite side of the airport. So you're actually potentially as much as a mile or, up here in Denver, we got some 10,000 foot runways, 2 miles, as far as 2 miles further, closer to the touchdown zone than your ILS DME is reading.
Okay. Is there any other tools you got? This
Um,
another one's generally part of your audio panel.
yeah, we've got I believe you're talking about marker beacons.
Yep, marker beacons. Um, so the blue one, which one's
Hmm.
that called?
That's an outer marker beacon.
Okay, and what does this usually indicate?
It usually indicates the final approach fix.
All right, yep, final approach fixed. A lot of times glide slope intercept. Right,
Hmm.
awesome. Now the visual segment of the approach, I need to see a couple things for me to actually go below minimums.
Hmm.
If all I see is sequential white blinking lights when I hit my minimums, do I have to go around or can I continue to descend?
If you see sequential white blinking lights, uh, I'm trying to think if that means you can descend another 100 feet. Let's see what it says here. Let's see what we've got here. Yeah, so if you have the approach lighting system, that allows you to descend to 100 feet above the touchdown zone. So if you have sequential white blinking lights, that means you can descend to within 100 feet of the touchdown zone. but you do, yeah, and you do not have to go missed, but you cannot land yet.
Awesome, awesome. So just make sure because I know initially you said you can descend another 100 feet. It is to 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation. Because remember, not every ILS will take you down to 200 feet AGL. There are
Right.
some that'll take you down to 300, some that'll take you down to 100, or some that'll take you down to 250. So once you got those lights in sight, you can go to 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation, which is why it's
Yeah.
important to bring up touchdown zone elevation in your approach briefing.
Okay.
Right? Have you ever actually had to do an approach, to that 100 feet above touchdown zone, following those white blinky lights?
No, the one time we shot an approach in actual, we broke out about 300 feet above minimums.
Okay, yes, but I mean, it was still a wildly different experience than doing it under the hood, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you got access to a sim, doing those white blinky lights to 100 feet above touchdown zone elevation is even in the sim, you're like, oh my God, am I going to see it? Like, when do I go
Yeah,
missed kind of thing. So if
for
you can get
sure.
the experience, it's definitely worth it. I've had to do it once in general aviation and it was terrifying.
Yeah,
Just like, I see the white blinking lights. Where are these trees at?
right.
Awesome. Have you ever heard the phrase of a VDP?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe to me what a VDP is?
It's a point that's published on a chart sometimes. When it's not published, you can calculate it.
Okay.
But it's a point that it's a suggestive point, especially to us in general aviation, that says that at this VDP, you can continue descending and making a stabilized approach to landing.
Okay. So you are right. There's nothing like legally binding about it except for 91-175 says the aircraft must be in a continuous position from which a descent to landing can be made on the intended runway can be made at a normal rate of descent using normal maneuvers.
Right.
So I mean, saying VDP is a suggestion is, I guess, it's a little loose,
Well,
right?
if
Because
I
91.
right, but if I'm in my arrow with 10,000 feet of runway and I'm at the VDP going 90 knots over the ground, I can still make what you just read. I can still comply with 91-175, making a stabilized approach using normal maneuvers and a normal descent rate to the ground. Am I going to land maybe a little bit past 1,000 footers? Sure, but I still feel very confident that I can accomplish that. If I'm in a jet or the Malibu you mentioned earlier, that's a different story.
Awesome, awesome. So let's take a look at, if you want to look at it, the Papa 08 VOR runway 5. So airports Papa 08 VOR runway 5.
Okay, let me pull that up. Okay, it looks like we've got Coolidge Municipal, VOR runway 5.
Yep.
Okay.
So is there a VDP published on this one?
No, there's not.
There is not. So what would a suggested VDP be for this runway or for this approach? Like if you had to
Um,
calculate one.
yeah, so you do your altitude. What is it? It's altitude minus touchdown zone divided by 3, I think. Let's see what that gets us. So our touchdown zone is 1564, and we're going to be well, let's say we're straight in, so we're going to be okay. They're the same altitude. 22 minus 15 minus 1564. Uh, 636 feet divided by 3, isn't it? 212 divided. I thought it was divided by 3.
You're missing two zeros. Divided by 300.
Oh, it's divided by 300. Okay.
So I mean, you already did the math. You said 212, so 2.12,
2.1 nautical miles.
right? So how would I identify that?
You identify it off of the Stanfield VOR.
Okay, so what DME would identify my BDP?
22 DME.
Solid 22 DME. So if I get farther than 22 DME away from the Stanfield VOR, I could generally expect to go missed. Given that, again, I've got a 5,500 foot runway. Some people might be comfortable with it. I don't think I would. I would.
Sometimes it'll save your life. If you
Yep,
know you
exactly.
can descend past the VDP and you don't quite see the runway yet, sometimes it'll save your life.
Let's go take a look at SDL. Now, I'm just going to open up the approach. It's the VOR DME Alpha. Okay. Why is this one not assigned a runway?
Let me just give me a second to pull it up on my end, so I'm
Yeah, of course. No, you're
got a
fine.
better look. Which one were VOR DME Alpha?
Yes.
Okay. That's not assigned a runway because the runway that it could be assigned to, runway 3, is just too far off of an angle away from the runway.
Yeah, so the final approach course is too far off from a runway.
Yeah.
What's the threshold? Because that VOR that we just looked at into Coolidge, it's 20 degrees off. Final approach course is 20 degrees off from the runway heading.
This
What's
one
the
is
threshold?
It's 30 degrees.
It is 30 degrees solid. Now let's talk about GPS. We briefly touched on it, but your aircraft is WAS capable.
Yeah.
Can you just give me again just a Barney style breakdown of the different levels of GPS when it comes to aircraft navigation?
There's regular GPS, which uses which utilizes 3 satellites to compute its location. And then there's RAIM, which stands for Receiver Autonomous Integrity Monitoring, which uses a 4th GPS to double check that the 3 GPS signals are correct. And then the highest is WAS, which is Wide Area Augmentation System, which uses ground-based units to compute an error to your GPS to improve its accuracy. Because the problem with GPS is that satellites don't know where they are. Satellites have no idea where they are, whereas the ground-based facilities do know where they're located. And so they use that known ground-based location to communicate a correction in your navigation to achieve much higher degrees of accuracy.
All right. Now, when it came to RAIM, you were correct when it comes to the 4 satellites. But I need something else if all I have is 4 satellites. What else do I need?
Something else to qualify RAIM, you need a RAIM check.
Oh yeah, so RAIM. So if all I have is 4 satellites, I need an altimeter input into my GPS unit.
Okay.
So I need an altitude encoder that goes into my GPS unit. So you know how your transponder tells ATC what altitude you're at?
Yeah.
That it's got an altitude encoder that talks to the transponder. It's pretty much just got like a little box that plumbs into your static system.
Okay.
That changes that static pressure into something your transponder can read.
Okay.
Your GPS needs the same thing if all you have is 4 satellites.
Okay.
If I don't have that extra little box, then I need 5 satellites.
Okay.
Okay. And when it came to 3D position, you need 4. 3 satellites only gives you a 2D position.
Okay, so then it's 4, and then the 5th one gives you the corrective the correction.
Well, the fifth one doesn't apply corrections. It only provides you fault detection.
Right.
Okay.
R-
So if I only have 5 satellites and no baro-weighted altimeter, then all I have is RAIM with fault detection. The RAIM will tell me whenever it sees a fault. That's all it will tell me. And it will just tell me RAIM fault or loss of integrity. And congratulations, I don't have RAIM anymore. I'm still technically good for 5 minutes. If I get a 6th satellite, or if I have 5 and a baro-weighted altimeter, when I get a fault, the GPS can go, not today, Felicia, and kick that one out.
Right.
It's called fault exclusion. Okay. When it came to WAS, solid when it came to a ground-based, when you were talking about how we've got the ground-based corrections or facilities, to get like a whole breakdown of how it all works. Microsoft Paint. So up in space, right, we've got a GPS satellite. Up in space, we've got a little GPS satellite. And then down here on the ground, or, in the air, we've got our little airplane, little wing and whatnot. Yeah, that's an airplane, sure. And we get that signal from space. So boom, GPS satellite gives us a signal. If we get a bunch more satellites, we have a real location of where we're at. All those satellites will also beam it to the ground-based station, and this ground-based station will take all of those satellite signals, and it's going to send it to a master station somewhere else. Okay. So those first little ground-based stations aren't doing anything with it. They're just picking it up, sending it off to a master station. And that master station is what applies the corrections. Okay. This master station will then take those corrections and send it up to a geostationary satellite up here. And it'll send all those corrections and new data up to it. And then that satellite will send all those corrections to your airplane and another pseudo range signal to provide more accuracy and more clarification and apply any corrections to these other satellites that we were looking at down here. That's the whole kind of range that it goes through. So normal GPS satellites give your airplane information. They also give a receiver station information. The receiver station sends it to a master station. The master station applies any corrections that are needed, sends it up to a geostationary satellite that then beams another signal back down to your airplane. Right?
Okay.
Geostationary, what geostationary really just means is that they're moving at the same rate that the Earth is rotating so that they stay above the same spot.
Right.
All right. Just to give you like the full picture of like where these signals are going from.
For sure.
We talked about what that allows our aircraft to do already. We talked about the difference between RNAV and GPS and that they're not interchangeable terms. RNAV is an envelope that sits over other forms of navigation where GPS is a type of it. Let's dig into some kind of illusions that you might experience while flying around an IFR. So let's say since you do have that high performance endorsement, you can fly some high performance aircraft. You can fly some stuff with some scoochums, right? So let's say I apply full power for some reason or another. I'm trying to accelerate because ATC said, proceed as fast as reasonable, max forward speed to the next fix. And now I feel like I'm tumbling backwards. Why did this happen?
That happened because I'm going to go to my illusion notes. Tumbling backwards. So the scenario was that you accelerated quickly and now you feel like you're climbing. Is that?
Yeah, climbing backwards, tumbling backwards, or climbing or tumbling backwards. Yep.
Yeah. So that's called the elevator illusion. And it's basically just an error in your inner ear, your vestibular system, that's causing you to feel like you're your body's doing something that it's not.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, what instrument could I look to really quick to tell me like, hey, look, I'm not climbing? Which one would really give me the first indication on whether or not my ear is telling me the truth?
Probably your altimeter.
Yep, altimeter. Awesome. Um, Now, can you tell me what the leans are and how they generally happen?
That's what happens when you level off after a really long climb. Um, and then you feel like you're turning. You're banking in one direction or another.
Right. So it's normally not associated with a climb. It's normally associated with a turn, right? So
Okay.
if ATC was like, hey, if we're flying northbound and ATC is like, hey, turn left heading 270. All right, continue that turn heading 180. Okay, continue
Right.
that turn heading 090. You know what? Just bring it right back around heading 360.
Hmm.
If we're doing standard rate turns, that just took us 2 minutes,
Right.
right? That's a pretty long time to be turning. So our vestibular system, as you were talking about, it could level out in that turn.
Right.
So when I level those wings, now that the airplane's level, my ears are like, we're not level. Something's cattywampus.
Yeah. You go the other
And
way.
yep. And then to fix that, I drop a wing to try and level my ears. What
Hmm.
could this lead into?
Uh, that's called the graveyard spin.
Spiral.
Spiral. Graveyard spiral.
Yep. Graveyard
That's where
spiral.
it just keeps getting worse. And then at some point you probably pull back on the yoke because you think you're descending, and you get yourself into a stall and a spin.
So graveyard spiral and a spin, two different things. We'll talk about the graveyard spiral to begin with, because this usually does start with the leads.
Hmm.
Remember, when we're doing steep turns, we need to pull back, because we've lost a vertical component of lift, right?
Right.
Well, the leans, what happens to a lot of people is they start getting under the impression that their instruments are broken,
Right.
right? So they're no longer trusting their attitude indicator. So just forget that my attitude indicator is telling me the right thing. So people think their ears are correct. So when they've turned this airplane, they've lost a vertical component of lift, and they haven't applied any power to overcome the new drag that they've induced, meaning their airplane's probably either going to slow down or it's going to descend.
Right.
Well, for them to try and stop that descent, they keep pulling. But since we've lost that vertical component of lift, the only thing that ends up happening is we end up getting a little bit of bank over, and we start pulling and spiraling down. Remember the difference between a spin and a spiral. Here's a spin. Here's a spiral. That makes sense?
Right.
A spin, the axis of rotation is within the airplane. A spiral, the axis of rotation is outside of the airplane.
Okay.
Now, if I was to actually get into a spin, which, hopefully they never, you don't end up in a spin in IFR, because that just seems terrifying. Which rudder do I press? How do I know which rudder to press?
You're supposed to press the opposite rudder, or whichever one. This is something I learned from you on TikTok. Is whichever one fights you.
Yep. Whichever rudder fights back.
Yeah.
Because remember, there's not really a whole lot of attitude indicators out there that are rated for spins. They have like a pitch and bank limit. It's like, I think it's a bank limit of like 90 degrees and a pitch limit of something like 45 is what most are rated for.
Right.
And in a spin, you very likely could be exceeding that.
Right.
Your G5, I promise, it is not going to like spins.
Oh,
It's
and we have a AV30 for the attitude indicator, so it's even more useless.
oh God, I got a buddy that just
Ask me about actual with an AV30 attitude indicator.
yeah, no, I'm good. I got a buddy that like will fight tooth and nail that those things are the best thing since sliced bread, and
Mhm.
since they're cheaper than a G5, and I'm just like, nah, man, like
They're
for the
cheaper than a G.
$600.
They're cheaper than a G5, but put the G5 in it because you already have the AHAR system and the air data computer in there. That's the
Yeah,
expensive part, right?
it's well, okay. So G5 is a completely contained system. It's got a built-in AHRS and ADC. Like there's not like a
Oh, you don't
separate
have to
box
put
it's
a
talking to.
separate. Oh, you don't have to put a separate. Oh, so they're
No,
even cheaper than I thought.
yeah. And even the AV30s, like they're all self-contained.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I thought it was a separate
Yeah.
box.
No, so like the G3X, and I know we're getting a little off topic, but I don't care. Don't roast me in the comments, people. Um, we're learning things. So there's things like the G3X Touch where you need a separate AHRS and ADC. The G1000, have you ever seen a G1000?
Yeah.
The things you see, those are just screens.
Okay.
All right. You can buy those screens separately. Yes, in most installations, the AHRS and ADC gets mounted to the back of the screen, but they can be remote mounted.
Right.
Okay. Even in like airliners, when you see all those screens up there, there's no AHRS and ADC attached to the back of those screens. They're
Right.
underneath the cockpit.
Right.
The G5s, the AV30s, even like, what is it? Aspen, all of their stuff, it's
Yeah.
all self-contained.
Okay. Yeah. So
Okay.
then that's even more reason to buy a G5. Yes, a G5 because it's all self-contained. The price of the G5, the only thing you need to add to that is the price of installation. You don't need to add the price of an air data computer.
Yeah. The only extra thing you got to add with a G5 installation is if you want to use it as an HSI, you got
Yeah.
to put a magnetometer somewhere in the airplane.
Okay, so that's not self-contained.
No, so
No.
it has an AHRS, so it'll calculate like GPS direction.
Right.
If you give it a GPS antenna, which is required based on the installation, but for you to get like a true HSI, you have to remote mount a G5, which is it's a little or not a G5. You have to remote mount a magnetometer,
Yeah.
which it's a little puck, and people put them in the wings.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Right?
sure.
It's a super simple installation.
They're
Um,
they're significantly better than AV30s in every way. I think we can agree.
yeah, yeah. And Nick, if you're watching, not the only one that thinks AV30s are garbage.
We'll start a
So
petition.
yeah, it's hilarious because they're trying to get the HSI for the AV30 approved for IFR. And based on what I've seen and heard of them, I just awesome. So we're good when it comes to spatial disorientation. Just remember, trust our instruments. A little bit more touch up on the graveyard difference between a graveyard spiral and a graveyard spin or a spin, just in general. Make sure don't interchange the terms spiral and spin are not interchangeable.
Okay.
Okay. Spiral, the axis of rotation is outside of the aircraft. A spin, the axis of rotation is inside the aircraft. If you try to recover from a spiral, the way that you would recover from a spin, you're very likely just going to snap the tail off the airplane.
Okay.
Because in a spiral, you're most of the time accelerating.
Right.
Remember back in Private Pilot when you did your first steep turn and you just ended up spiraling down and couldn't keep your airspeed under control?
For sure.
That's a great, imagine doing that in IFR.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
graveyard spiral.
Yeah.
So if you were to try and recover from that by stomping on the rudder and pushing the yoke forward, you're gonna break the tail off the airplane.
Right.
Okay. Now let's talk about some weather. You talked about thunderstorms in Private Pilot, I'm assuming, but there's a new type of thunderstorm, or not even necessarily a new type of thunderstorm, but given that we're going to be flying in IFR conditions where, we can't necessarily see the storm out in front of us because we're in the clouds, we have a new fear of something called embedded thunderstorms. What makes
Yes.
embedded thunderstorms so much more dangerous?
Well, it's really clear that you have a thunderstorm when it's one of the other three types of thunderstorms. When they're embedded, they're just that. They're embedded in the clouds, and you cannot see that you're coming across one unless you have some sort of onboard radar.
Yep. Now, is there any weather input in your aircraft?
Yeah, there's next rad weather.
Okay. Should that be used to try and navigate around storms or through storms? I guess would be a better way to put it.
I wouldn't go through storms.
No, it should not be used to try and pick holes through storms. How far should I try to stay away from storms?
The FAA says 20 nautical miles from a storm. I push that to 50.
Yeah, so it's you definitely want to keep away. Hail has been thrown out of thunderstorms up to 30 miles away.
Yeah.
So the last thing you want to do is be like, oh, that looks like
Yeah.
20. And
Yeah.
then next thing you know, you're getting pelted by baseballs.
Yep.
Um,
That's why I say 50.
yep, awesome. Now, what are the things I need for a thunderstorm?
You need three things. You need an unstable atmosphere. So that has to do with the unstable lapse rate specifically. You need a lifting force or some sort of convective activity. And then you need moisture.
Solid. What are the three stages of a thunderstorm?
You've got the building phase, the mature phase, and the dissipating phase.
How can I identify that the mature stage of a thunderstorm has started?
The second rain begins to hit the ground,
Perfect.
or precipitation.
Yeah, some level of precipitation, not necessarily always rain. Um, so thunderstorms are generally associated with strong, wind activity. What is wind shear?
Wind shear is when you get wind coming at itself or in different directions. And so if you're flying around and you've got a great 10 knot headwind. Say we're in the landing environment, we've got a great 10 knot headwind on final, lets us fly in the arrow at 65 knots over the ground. It's looking great, and then all of a sudden that 10 knot headwind becomes a 10 knot tailwind. You lose a ton of airspeed, and now you're getting blown across the ground at 90 knots.
Okay. Yeah, I mean 85, yeah, sure. Um, awesome. At least how the book describes wind shear is a sudden change in either direction or velocity generally associated with vertical movement, right? So if I'm climbing from 500 to 1600 or going from
Right.
1600 to 500 and I see, I've got, as you explained, 10 knot headwind changing to a 20 knot tailwind, or a 10 knot tailwind, that would be a loss of 20 knots of airspeed.
Right. Right.
Um, now what is a microburst?
A microburst is an area where it's an area where, okay, I'm going to describe it in terms of the way it affects the airplane, because I'm not sure what it is in terms of a weather phenomenon. But the way it affects the airplane is you'll see, at first you'll see an area of increased performance. You'll get either you'll be getting really great climb, or you'll be just getting great airspeed. And then all of a sudden that can really drastically shift to downdrafts, and you're really struggling to not end up in the weeds. You're pulling back as strong as you can, pitching for VX, trying to get rid of drag, bring up flaps, trying to out climb the intense downdraft. I think they can get down as far as 6,000 feet per minute.
Yep, they could be in excess of 6,000 feet per minute.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to, I see where you're coming from by pitching for VX, but what's going to be on the other side of that microburst? Tailwind.
Right. Right.
Probably as strong as that headwind. I mean, that headwind that you got is probably going to be like 30, 40 knots.
Mm-hmm.
That tailwind's probably going to be 30, 40 knots. If you're trying to climb out at VX, what's going to happen when I hit that tailwind?
Well, then you're going to lose
stall.
airspeed. Yeah. Yeah.
So try and maintain airspeed,
Mm-hmm.
and be at full power. Your airplane, I mean, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You end up in a microburst.
Oh, yeah.
Godspeed.
Yep.
But let's talk about icing. Is your airplane carbureted or fuel injected? I forget.
It's fuel injected.
Fuel injected, solid. Does that mean you don't have to worry about induction icing at all?
That's not true. You can still get ice forming over the air intake.
Yep, sure can. Now, is there any danger associated with, let's say, fueling up an airplane that's been sitting out out on the ramp and then taking right off into IFR conditions?
Well, there's a couple different areas. I'm not sure that you could be getting at. I'm not sure what if you meant anything, if that was a clue, the fueling up. But taking off immediately into IFR conditions, one, you could have icing in the clouds. Two, you could have frost or snow or ice itself already on the airplane. I'm not
Okay.
sure what you're getting at with the fueling part.
So you've put fuel in you've filled up the wings of this airplane at one point in time, right? You're not one of those lucky people that's never touched a fuel nozzle.
That's I've fueled airplanes. Yes.
Okay. Is the wing cold after you fill it up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Putting fuel in an airplane can drop the wing temperature 20 degrees,
Right.
right? And what defines icing conditions? Visible moisture and aircraft surface temperature below freezing.
Okay.
So even if the outside air temperature is above freezing, the fact that you just put a bunch of cold gas in this airplane and made
Right.
it cold,
Right. Okay.
especially after the aircraft's sitting out all night and cold soaking, that fuel absorbing that cold temperature,
Yeah.
right? That fuel cooling down. Fuel releases heat slower than your wing does, right? So when you first touch the wing, it might feel normal. But then when you put all that fresh gas in it that's cold in that fuel truck that's been sitting out all night,
Yeah.
now your wing temperature is below freezing. Congratulations. Even if you're reading your temperature above freezing,
Yeah.
you're going to start building up ice.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a couple different types of icing we can build up on an airplane. You know what they are?
Yeah. There's rime, clear, and mix.
Okay. Now, I'm looking out the window. This is not, we're going to forget the whole fueling scenario. I'm just cruising along, fat, dumb, and happy. And I'm looking out the window and I see this weather out the window that was most likely going to cause clear icing. So, really, what I'm asking is what weather would you see that you would most likely assume you would start picking up clear ice?
Slightly warmer temperatures. Still below freezing, but warmer when compared to rime icing is what you're
Okay.
looking for. And then I guess you're looking for that's tough. I'm not entirely sure other than clear ice, other than, I know that clear ice forms at slightly warmer temperatures. I'm not sure what other weather phenomenons you're looking for.
Okay, so clear ice generally forms when you have large supercooled liquid water droplets impacting either at a temperature below freezing, like an outside air temperature below freezing, usually not below -10,
Right.
um, and then it spreads out and freezes. Right, so we get a supercooled liquid water droplet, something that doesn't have something in it to freeze to.
Right.
Right, because to form that crystalline structure, there needs to be some kind of ice nucleus.
Right.
Okay. So if we've got that outside air temperature below freezing or that surface temperature of the wing below freezing, and then it impacts that supercooled liquid water droplet, that water droplet that's the temperature of the water droplet is below freezing, but it doesn't have an ice nucleus.
Right.
Your wing now became the ice nucleus.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
But you were looking for super cooled water. I thought maybe you were looking for some specific type of clouds or some specific type of atmospheric conditions. That's what I was confused by.
Okay, so I was kind of looking for that, right? I'm looking for large droplets.
Okay.
All right.
With clear icing, it's large droplets.
Yep. So I'm looking for rain showers. Now, if I looked out the window and I saw mist or fog or freezing fog, something like that, misty conditions, kind of reduced visibility and super cold, like -15 or so, then I'm going to start picking up rime icing. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Now, do you have any anti-ice or de-ice equipment on this aircraft?
Yes, I have a windshield defroster and a pitot and static system. Just ready to take on the world with those two systems.
Now, is your static port? Oh, because
it's mounted on the.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's a pitot mast.
It is.
All right.
It's
Yep.
wonderful.
I've got the same one. Awesome. So, weather, just look a little bit more into icing, is really what I would say there, because that's really the big concern. I do love that when we talked about, combating ice, you brought up the fact that you do have a window defroster, the amount of students that forget that they have a window defroster. I forgot I had a window defroster.
It's pretty useless though.
Um,
Doesn't exactly prevent tailplane stalls, does it?
No, but it'll at least make it so you can see the crash site.
Yes, there we go.
Um, but other than that, I'd say, the two big things out of this would be look into procedures you don't have a lot of experience with. The stuff that you do, which is what most students end up at. The stuff that you do, you're great with. The stuff that you haven't looked at since you read it once in the AIM, obviously you
Yeah,
need to work on, right?
yeah,
So as I said, go to Trade a Plane, find a cool airplane, build a fake flight plan to bring it home. If you got access to things like Microsoft Flight Sim, do it in Microsoft Flight Sim. Okay. Um, if you don't, at least you got the experience with the flight plan. Share it with your instructor, share it with another pilot, share it with another, you know, anybody else that knows even an iota about aviation or about instrument flying. Share it with them, get their point of view. So you've got the experience going, okay, well, and then share fly it, right? So, okay, I am going to take my, the L-36 that I won from Liquid Death's little competition from wherever they parked it at to home. So I need to file an IFR flight plan with my L-36 with a service ceiling of 45,000 feet and a climb rate of, 2,000 feet per minute or 16,000 feet per minute, right?
yeah,
So share fly that fake flight plan so that you can get the experience and have that applicable as opposed to just trying to memorize it,
yeah,
right? Because that's where a lot of the problems come in. You look at the book and you expect it to just ingrain into your brain, or you take a nap on the book and hope that it's gonna, sink in there by osmosis, but it's not.
right.
Okay. Icing would be the only like weather phenomenon that I'd say, just dig a little bit more into, especially given where you're flying.
Yeah, for sure.
We need to be able to look out the window and go like, okay, that's going to be clear ice up there. I need to definitely avoid that. I mean, I guess any ice you definitely need to avoid, but
Yeah,
knowing the severity of what the problem you're about to get into,
yeah.
if necessary. Um, is there anything that we didn't cover that you're kind of like, hey, I really want to get more into that? Um, I'd say you're like 80% of the way there. Just with those two little subjects, you'd be fine.
Yeah. Um, we didn't talk very much about systems, so we could maybe get in a little bit into that. Um,
Okay.
Not that I particularly love talking about systems. Not that I want to be grilled about systems, but we could discuss systems. Um,
Awesome. Now, when you're saying discussing symptoms, are you talking about pedostatic instruments, gyroscopic instruments? Are you talking about like, hey, talk to me about the power plant that's in your aircraft? Why are propellers twisted? Do you have any hydraulic systems in this aircraft?
um, yeah, probably all of the
Okay.
above. Um, they're all
All right.
different systems on this airplane.
All right. Sounds good. So let's first kind of bring up your pedostatic instruments because your gyroscopic instruments have been placed by an AV30 and a G5, correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. So how does your altimeter function? Like, just give me a Barney style breakdown of how an altimeter functions.
So it's got like a diaphragm inside of it, and it's sealed, and so it's got I believe it's the pressure inside is 2992. And then as you climb, the air, or as you climb and descend, the air expands and contracts, and it uses the expansion or the contraction of this wafer system to read out on your altimeter.
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Um, I usually just use the term aneroid wafer. It's like, hey, there's a stack of aneroid wafers that are set to an appropriate pressure. I don't even talk about what is it 2992. I don't know. It's
I think
set
it
at the
might be. I'm
factory.
not sure.
Um, it's set at the factory is really what it is.
Yeah.
Um, but I've got a stack of aneroid wafers in there that are set at a specific pressure. As I climb, they expand. As I descend, they contract, and they are attached with linkages to swing my needle.
Yeah.
Right. Um, now, if my static port was to get plugged, is that going to impact my airspeed indicator at all?
Yes. I'm not sure how.
Okay. So, what does the static port do for the airspeed indicator?
Well, what I'm trying to think about is that the airspeed indicator is the only one of the pedostatic instruments that uses the pedo system itself. So it uses the pedo port to read ram air, and then how does it use the static port? I would imagine, if I remember correctly, it uses the static port to apply some sort of correction to that ram air to adjust the needle.
Okay, so
But it sounds like I'm
let's
not super familiar with the static port specific functions when it comes to the airspeed indicator.
so here's our airspeed indicator. Um, right inside, I've got a balloon, right?
Right,
And this balloon goes out to your pitot tube.
right,
Okay. So that's where that ram air pressure comes in. As that ram air pressure comes in, this balloon will either inflate or contract based on the amount of pressure coming in that tube. Now,
right,
let's pretend that this instrument was sealed at the factory just like this. Well, as
right,
the density of air inside this instrument, not inside this balloon, inside this instrument is now set. There is no way to change it. So as I climb in altitude, the density of this air will be greater than the density of the air coming in the pitot tube, meaning that as I climb, my airspeed indicator is going to bleed off. My airspeed is going to
right,
bleed off.
right.
Okay. Now, let's say I open this instrument up to the static port.
Right, then it's so I danced around it. So it's gonna work to correct for the the pressure from the pitot tube, because
Yep.
it's gonna correct for the change in altitude, change in air pressure as you climb or descend.
Change in air density. Yeah.
Air
Um,
density. Okay.
Now, let's say I plug up this static port
Hmm.
at altitude. When I go to descend, what is my airspeed going to read? Or what's going to happen as I descend?
Well, as you descend, the air is going to get denser and denser, so you're going to get higher and higher readings.
Now, if I was to, like, let's say, maintain an attitude, correct, I would get higher and higher readings. Let's be honest, we fly airspeed,
Right.
right? So I'm not going to start reading anything higher. My vertical descent rate might start being impacted, but again, if the static port's plugged, it's not like I'm going to, like, what am I going to read off of it, right? But as I start to descend, my airspeed, I'm going to be flying my airspeed because I want to maintain an appropriate airspeed. What's going to end up happening is maybe the stall indication is going to start coming on because it's reading higher than it actually is,
Right.
right? So let me now, if I was to, we obviously have a solution for a plugged static port. We have an alternate static source, correct?
Hmm.
How is that going to impact my altimeter? Am I going to start reading higher or lower, or am I going to read the same?
I think it starts reading lower.
So, is the
Well,
static pressure inside the cabin higher or lower?
well, see, I know there's an answer to this, but I don't understand the answer to this, because all the difference the only difference between the static port outside the airplane and the static port inside the airplane is that the static port outside the airplane potentially has some airspeed blowing across it,
Well, it has
right?
some airspeed blowing across it. Um, Really, the thing is, your doors aren't sealed.
Okay.
The doors on your airplane aren't sealed. The vents on your airplane aren't sealed. So as air moves past those gaps, it'll
Hmm.
actually pull air out of them.
So you get lower pressure in the airplane.
Yes, lower pressure in the airplane because as the airplane
Hmm.
moves through the atmosphere, the the little breaks in all the
Yeah.
seals, the little gaps all around
Okay.
the cabin are pulling air out.
Okay. So then you would get a higher altitude reading because
Exactly.
it has lower pressure.
Right. And you can see this when you get into the airplane. Next time you get into the airplane, pull the static port real
Yeah,
quick.
I've done it. I just didn't remember which direction it went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and really what it is, watch the VSI. As opposed
Yeah.
to watching the altimeter, watch the VSI, because when you pull it, the VSI goes whoop
Yeah.
and shoots up real fast, doesn't it?
Hmm. Yeah.
Showing you that the pressure got lower.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now, let's say you had an alternator failure in IFR.
Hmm.
What's your course of action?
And we're on an IFR flight plan in IMC.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we're just gonna get on with ATC. We're gonna let them know what happened, and we're gonna ask to land a little bit sooner.
As soon as possible. Nah, if
Yeah.
I'm in IFR, I'm getting the hell out.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you want
'cause-
radios and you want GPS to work and you want all that. You can also reduce the load on the battery at that point.
Mhm. That's always a good option. Now, you've got those glass instrumentation, which have backup batteries, correct?
I know the G5 has a backup battery. I'm not sure about the 650.
Oh, I'm not talking about your 650. I'm just talking about pure instruments right in front of you. The 650
okay.
does not have a backup
Yeah,
battery.
no, I
Promise
didn't
you
think
that.
it did. Yeah,
No.
I didn't think it did.
The G5 has a backup battery. Do you have a rough estimation on how long that might last you?
I think it's like 20 minutes.
Technically, it's rated for 4 hours,
Oh, okay.
right?
Wow.
Your main battery, 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
The backup battery in the G5,
Yeah.
it's rated for around 4 hours. And again, it's not a big deal that you don't know that. The only way you
Right.
find that is by looking up the part number for that backup battery.
Right.
And that's not.
Or
But you know
reading
it's gonna
through the
last.
G5 supplement, which is on my list of things to do.
To be honest, I don't think it's in the supplement.
It's not even a supplement.
No, I
Yeah.
think it's in the install instructions.
Yeah.
But just so you know, it's rated for 4 hours.
Okay.
Okay, so the G5's rated to outlast your fuel tanks.
That's good.
Yeah. So I mean, go through, read the G5 supplement, read your avionics supplements is really the big takeaway. Because a lot of students don't, even instructors don't. They're sitting in the airplane in the seat to the right of you, going, "Huh, I wonder what this thing does."
Right.
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 So read through them. A lot of this stuff you can get directly from Garmin for free on their websites.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend that. The G5s, they're pretty simple devices. There's not a whole lot you can do as the end user, as the pilot with them. That 650, yeah, definitely read in it because that 650, you can plan like descents in it. You could tell it glide path angles you want it to do when it comes to a VNAV profile. That 650 has a lot of uses in it that'll just make your life easier instead of trying to pull out a calculator in the aircraft trying to calculate a feet per minute.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the airspeed indicator, definitely dig into its failures.
Yeah.
Okay. The static port, I know we walked through them, but just try to solidify it after the fact. Okay. So we're coming up on we've got our time frame here. So last thing I want to do, have you ever used Discord before, or is it new to you?
No, this is the first time I've used it.
Okay, so I'm going to show you my screen, just give you a quick little rundown. So when you first showed up, it might have dropped you here, or it might have dropped you, in the waiting room, right where we just showed up, right
Mhm.
where we're doing this. So rules and roles request, I already verified you already, so you don't have to worry about this. But what might be a little bit more interesting for you is this section down here, aviation. So we've got aviation general, anything, that's interesting that you want to talk about. We got all kinds of nonsense in here. Somebody just became a flight engineer on like a 767 or a 707 or something like that. Somebody else is taking apart their airbox, just a group for everyone to talk about aviation in general. But then we've got our pilot training section. If as you're going through your studying and you're like, hey, I don't understand this, I'm still struggling with this, ask. It doesn't hurt. When you do go finish your check ride or whatnot, tell us about it. This person just went for seaplane training. We got other people that are sharing instrument ground school lessons. come here, hang out. If you got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. There's 8 other flight instructors, and they are signified by blue, a little blue dot next to their name, or their names are blue. Okay, so the little dark gray, or little grayish one, they're pilots. The blue ones, they're CFIs.
Okay.
Okay. Any big questions that you want to start like a long thread about, like that discussion we were saying, like safety pilots, what do they need? Do they need the endorsements? Do they not need the endorsements? What references have you found? We can start a little thread about it, talk about it. Any kind of news, come share it. Check ride gouge. This one is where a lot of students, that's probably the only reason half of the people here are here, because they're trying to get gouges to see how other people's check rides went to help them prep for the next one. What I use this for is trying to make my little mock check rides as accurate to the actual check ride as possible, because I don't get the letters from the FAA telling me, hey, these are the subjects we need to focus on. Okay.
Right.
But DPEs do. So this is a great tool for you if you're curious about what might be covered on your instrument check ride. But when you get done with your check ride, come tell us about it. Right? Help the next person. Help me make these better. And I guess that's about it.
Well,
Right?
great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'd say, as I said, there's just a few little things to clean up. I wouldn't necessarily say that you would have failed a check ride, but there would have definitely been a couple debrief items that we would have had to talk about, or the DPE would have had to talk about after the fact. I'd
Okay.
say you'd pass. Just brush up on those things, and there wouldn't even be a concern of those debrief items.
Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome. All right,
Thank
man.
you so much.
No problem. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well.